Some fighters never win a UFC title because they weren't good enough. Others never win one because they weren't lucky enough. And then there's Joseph Benavidez, a guy who did everything right, trained with the best, beat the best, fought for the belt 5 times, lost all 5. 3 times in brutal fashion, mind you, and one of the best to never wear gold. 28 wins, only 8 losses. Over a decade ranked top 3 in the world. By every stat that matters, Joseph Benavidez was championship material. Except the only one that really counts, the belt.
Well, we know that you wanted to be champion, and unfortunately, it didn't happen for you. But are you able to look back and be okay with all the great accomplishments you did achieve?
Honestly, yeah. I mean, if anyone that knows me, I'm not very good with praise and stuff, and sometimes I'm not even proud of stuff I do, but in a way, I feel like that was almost helped me with my longevity in my career. You know, I've been top 2 or 3 in the world in 2 different weight classes for 10 years straight. It's because I never stopped and was like, oh, I'm doing great. I always thought my next fight was gonna be my best.
So was he just unlucky, or was something else going on? Was Joseph Benavidez cursed? Today we're telling the full story. A fighter who reached the peak, only to fall every time it mattered most. This is Joseph Benavidez, the most cursed UFC contender of all time. Joseph Benavidez was never supposed to make it. Born in San Antonio, Texas, a Mexican-American, small kid with a chip on his shoulder. Got into fights early, but found wrestling as a way out. He wasn't built like the others, 5'4", compact, explosive. He wasn't going to overpower anyone, but he was quick and gritty. He started training MMA while working construction jobs and turned pro at 22. Won 10 of his first 11 fights. And that is when Uriah Faber saw something in him. Brought him up to Team Alpha Male in Sacramento. At that time, Alpha Male was a wrecking crew for lighter weight classes. Faber, Mendez, Dillashaw. Joe fit right in. The only problem, the UFC did not have a flyweight division. Benavidez was a natural 125er, fighting guys at 135. And it didn't matter. He still made a name for himself in the WEC. In the WEC, Benavidez showed everyone who he was. He beat Danny Martinez, then Jeff Caron, both solid guys, beaten with speed, cardio, and technique. Then came his first shot at gold. WEC 50, Dominick Cruz versus Joseph Benavidez for the WEC bantamweight title. 5 rounds, fast pace, tight exchanges. Joe pushed the action. Cruz moved, countered, stuck to his game plan. Split decision loss. 1 judge gave it to Benavidez, 2 gave it to Cruz. He was right there, a hair's breadth away from being a world champion. But he didn't make it. In 2010, the WEC merged with the UFC. Benavidez came in hot. Beat Ian Loveland, beat Eddie Wineland, who was a former WEC champ. Still undersized and still dominating. Finally, in 2012, the UFC announced a new flyweight division. The 125-pound tournament. Joseph Benavidez was front and center. Finally, the weight class that he was born for. Finally, a shot at a belt that felt right. In 2012, the UFC organized a flyweight tournament. This was it. Benavidez was finally fighting guys his own size, and he was thriving. In the semifinals, he faced Yasuhiro Urushitani, a Japanese veteran. And Joe didn't wait. He dropped him, finished him in round 2. Explosive, clean, and vicious. Exactly what the UFC wanted from the flyweights. Benavidez was heading to the finals for the inaugural UFC Flyweight Championship. His opponent? Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, a pound-for-pound technician, fast, tactical, but still very beatable. At least that's what everyone thought. September 22nd, 2012, UFC 152, Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Benavidez versus Johnson. History is on the line. The winner becomes the first ever UFC flyweight champion. It was a close fight. Both guys had moments. Joe landed the heavier shots, DJ landed more of them. But when the dust settled, Demetrious Johnson by split decision. Another split, another belt that just slipped through Joe's fingers. This one stung, because this wasn't just about a loss. It was about history, legacy, the first ever flyweight king, and it wasn't him. Benavidez had done everything right, but right wasn't enough. A lesser fighter would have folded, but Joe, well, Joe just kept on coming. He rattled off wins against top fighters like Ian McCall, Darren Unoyama, and Hussier. He was tearing through the division, but all roads led back to DJ. December 14th, 2013, UFC on Fox 9, Benavidez versus Johnson 2. This time, no decisions, no judging controversies. Joe was ready to take the belt by force. And then, the unthinkable happened. 2 minutes and 8 seconds. That is how long it took Demetrious Johnson to knock him out cold. Joe had never been knocked out before, but DJ hit him with a perfect right hand. Lights out. The silence in the arena was deafening. The heart of Team Alpha Male laid flat on the canvas. It was the worst loss of his career, and it crushed him. 3 title shots, 3rd loss. And now, people were saying it out loud. Maybe he's just not championship material. And it also soured some of the fans' taste about seeing him in another title fight.
Do you feel for Joseph? I know he's not your homie, but I think there's a lot of respect there, and you guys are definitely guys that, get along, I guess, when you run into each other. But, I mean, I personally feel like if there ever is going to be a third crack at a champion, he's the one guy that's earned it.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard. You can't, there's a side of you that feels bad and a side of you that doesn't. It's like, if he loses for a third time, does he just retire from the division? Does he, what do you do with him? The UFC is all about making stars and marketing. I think they're more about marketing and making stars and making compelling matchups. Not a lot of people were calling for the Joseph Benavidez third rematch. Like, a lot of media people are like, I don't want to see it again.
Benavidez took the criticism and then turned that into fuel. He started another win streak. Beat Dustin Ortiz again. Beat John Moraga. Beat Ali Bagatunov. Joe was winning big. But the UFC wasn't in a rush to give him another title shot. Not after that brutal knockout. DJ was cleaning out the division, and Joe was stuck in limbo. Good enough to beat everyone else, but not enough to dethrone the champ. The purgatory of MMA contenders. And that is when things started to fall apart. Benavidez had been grinding. He was still a fan favorite and a warrior, but now the pieces of his life and career started falling into place in ways that he never expected. It wasn't just the UFC title that seemed out of reach, it was everything around him. His team, Team Alpha Male, they were on shaky ground. The locker room tension, rising. They had one of the best coaches in the game, Dwayne Bang Ludwig. But things weren't clicking the way they used to. The chemistry was off. Big personalities, little egos. And the worst part, rumors started circulating about the relationship between Benavidez and Cody Garbrandt starting to crack. It wasn't just another rivalry, it was personal. You see, Benavidez, who was once a mentor to Garbrandt, was now in a strange place. Garbrandt was getting big, and Benavidez was, still waiting for his chance. Joe couldn't keep his eyes off the flyweight division's bigger names. Cejudo was emerging, Mighty Mouse was dominating, and Benavidez was stuck. He had to change his approach. Team Alpha Male, with its growing tensions, had started to unravel. The once dominant camp was now divided. Benavidez found himself looking for new training partners, new paths, and new motivations. Meanwhile, the UFC flyweight division was changing. Mighty Mouse was still on top, but Cejudo, he was coming in fast. In 2018, Joe finally started to see the light at the end of the tunnel. He wasn't going to let his story be written for him. He was going to write it himself. He trained with newly emerging Fight Ready Gym in Arizona, working with Henry Cejudo's coach Eric Albarracin, and taking his career into his own hands. The wins kept coming. It looked like a fairy tale in the making. The UFC was finally talking about a potential third fight against Mighty Mouse, but fate had other plans. In 2018, it happened. Henry Cejudo shocked the world and dethroned Demetrius Johnson at UFC 227 in a thrilling battle. And just like that, the flyweight division was changing in real time. Cejudo was now the champion, and he wasn't interested in just being good. No, he was a statement. He was cocky. And Benavidez, he was on his radar. In 2020, Benavidez got one more chance, but it wasn't against Cejudo. In fact, Cejudo decided to vacate the title, and Benavidez was set to fight Deiveson Figueiredo. Now, the first fight was wild and controversial. Deiveson missed weight, which meant the belt was only on the line for Benavidez. If Joe won, he would be champion, but if he lost, the title stayed vacant. Joe started strong. He looked sharp in the opening exchanges, but one clash of heads changed everything. The accidental headbutt rocked him. Seconds later, a bomb of a right hand landed, and Joe was out cold. It was brutal, and it didn't feel right. The ending was messy. It called for a rematch. And that rematch came fast. And this time there were no questions, no controversy, just dominance. Deiveson dropped Joe early, overwhelmed him with pressure, and finished the fight with a slick rear naked choke in the first round. It was one-sided and hard to watch. This was Joe's final shot at the flyweight crown, and it slipped away. Twice. It's not just about losing the belt, it's about the moments. The ones where you believe so strongly that you can taste it. And then, in an instant, it's all gone. Joe had been chasing greatness for years, but the story just didn't have the fairy tale ending. But here's the thing, Benavidez never let go. Even in the face of the harshest of losses, he kept grinding. After the Deiveson fight, it was clear, Benavidez's time at the very top of the flyweight division had come to an end. But like any true champion, he didn't walk away with bitterness. Instead, Joe left behind a legacy, a trail of memories, and a reputation as one of the most skilled and respected fighters in UFC history. His battles with fighters like Dominick Cruz, Henry Cejudo, and Deiveson Figueiredo had earned him the respect of the MMA community. He was the guy who showed up time after time, even when it seemed like the world was stacked against him. And that, well, that's what true champions are made of. Benavidez may not have worn the title around his waist, but he earned something far more valuable: respect. He wasn't just fighting for gold, he was fighting for his place in the history of MMA. He helped define the flyweight division and inspired countless others to chase their dreams, no matter the setbacks.
It was time to move on, and I think the main reason, fight-wise, is like I always did it to be the best and to have fun. You know, my last title shot was definitely my last title shot, and it was like, all right, so that part's done. Well, can I still have fun doing it? You know, I'm seeing guys coming in, the guys I'm gonna fight, you know, are coming to me and like, hey, dude, I used to watch you on TV with my dad when I got out of school, when I got out of practice. And I'm just like, well, that's not gonna be like fun. And then like even the older part of the division is kind of like I coached on The Ultimate Fighter, have that relationship with them. So I was like, it honestly doesn't sound fun. Like I don't want to beat up a guy that like looks up to me that watched me with his dad.
After hanging up his gloves in 2021, Joe didn't disappear. Far from it. He transitioned into the role of a commentator for the UFC. His voice became synonymous with flyweight action, breaking down the technical aspects of the game for a new generation of fans. He was the expert in the booth, analyzing the very fights he once competed in. But perhaps most notably, Benavidez started to shift his focus. He began to share his story, to help the young fighters coming up. He became a mentor and a guide. In a sport that is known for being brutal and unforgiving, Joe Benavidez turned into the kind of voice that fighters and fans could rely on. Someone who had been through the grind and had seen it all. And let's not forget, Joe's heart and passion never faded. His love for the sport, his ability to stay grounded, and his commitment to helping others are what continue to make him a hero in the eyes of MMA fans. So, was Joseph Benavidez really cursed? I mean, not in the mystical sense, but if you break it down, timing, matchups, mental hurdles, and pure bad luck, the curse starts to make sense. Tactically, he always struggled with fighters who were just a little more precise. Demetrius Johnson with his angles and footwork, Figueiredo with his brute force and finishing instincts. Joe's style was pressure-heavy, volume-based, but when he faced elite timing and precision, he often got caught in transition. Mentally, you could see the weight of those title fights on his shoulders. The second DJ fight, the Deiveson rematch, it felt like the pressure consumed him. He wasn't just fighting the same way he did against other contenders. He was tight, overreaching, almost trying too hard to force a legacy moment. You could also say that he peaked at the wrong moments. Just as he matured into his prime, Demetrius Johnson entered his GOAT phase. Then when DJ left, Cejudo briefly took over, only to retire. And when the title was vacant again, Deiveson Figueiredo showed up as an unstoppable wrecking ball. Joe never got to face a champion on the downswing. It's also very hard to ignore Benavidez's bad luck. A clash of heads with Deiveson in their first fight, a referee stoppage in the second fight that some felt was premature. Fights that were razor close, going to the other guy. Even being too small for 135 and arriving in the UFC before 125 existed, it's as if the sport was always one step ahead of where he needed to be. So maybe it wasn't a curse in the supernatural sense, but for Joe Benavidez, the path to gold was blocked by a perfect storm of timing, pressure, and opponents who always had just enough to keep him from reaching the top. And that, in its own way, is a tragedy. If Joseph Benavidez's story feels familiar, well, that's because it should. He was the Leon Edwards before Leon Edwards finally won. The Colby Covington who never caught the break. He was the Dustin Poirier of the flyweights, always in the fire, always close, but never quite crowned. But what makes Joe's story legendary isn't what he didn't achieve, it's how he handled the heartbreak. Always gracious, always dangerous, and always respected.